Welcome back to Why We Love Superman, episode 4 via the Comic Binge YouTube channel. I am your host, Paul Herman. I am very excited to have the regular, I guess you call him regular Why We Love Superman host. I mean, I'm just going to say it, regular. I'm going to convince Michael Bailey to come on a regular basis every 3 months or something like that. We'll figure it out. I'll beg him. I'll guilt trip him. I'll figure something out. So anyway, we are going to conclude the Warworld Saga, the fantastic, oops, spoiler alert, I just spoiled what my thoughts were. Fantastic Warworld Saga, written by the one and only Philip Kennedy Johnson. I'm super excited to get into it, dive into it with 3 diehard Superman fans. But if you haven't already, I'd really appreciate if you go and hit the subscribe button because, you know, I just would really appreciate it. Chris would really appreciate it. We got lots of great content out there. Go check out the other shows we have on the channel. All the sub series, we have a ton of them. We have something for everybody, I think, on the Comic Binge. But go ahead and leave a love note, aka a comment, subscribe, all that jazz. So, without further ado, I will add all regular people on here, or my regular co-host, I should say, partner in crime, Mr. Chris Clow. Hi, Chris. How are we doing today?
Truth and justice.
Indeed, truth and justice. And I guess I'd call him like third on pretty much third co-host, permanent co-host here, Javi Trujillo, El Corazon. How we doing?
Good. How you fellas doing?
I'm doing all right after watching the Ahsoka finale. It's not the time or place to talk about it, but it was I have a lot to say. But but this is not Star Wars. This is Superman. God damn it! But this is a space epic we're talking about, right? So I mean.
Kind of fits.
Throw it out there. I mean, it kind of does fit. I guess this will be the person who will ultimately tell us if it fits or not, because I think he's to me the definitive voice of all this, which is Michael Bailey.
Oh,
I'm doing Michael Bailey.
We're not talking about Star. Okay, I'll put this away.
How you doing, sir? How are you doing?
I am doing fantastic. Thank you for having me back.
Thank you.
To finish out this trilogy of episodes. So.
Yes, trilogy of episodes, which I will show in my hand here, is part 3. It's a Warworld Revolution, which is very interesting. This just came out recently, or 3 or 4 months ago, and we're going to talk about all the goodness of the Warworld Saga, which I kind of wish. I feel that DC kind of missed out a little bit on an opportunity to call it just the Warworld Saga as a whole. Like
that's what it's called in the big trade that's coming out in a month.
Right. And I'm happy it's going to happen, but I feel like they should have did it from the start, because I feel like more people would have been kind of more on board and understood what's going on more a little bit, in my opinion. At least in my opinion.
Just as well as I do that they market way more on the trade side than the periodical side. Mm-hmm. So more people are probably going to come aboard for that. Yeah,
that's true. So anyway, all right. Well, so it's been a while since we've been on. It's like I moved since last time we did this. Life has been crazy, and everyone's got their own lives going on and all that jazz. But anyway, I'm excited to talk about this because I read this about 3 weeks ago. And I've been really, really looking forward to checking this out. And it's one of those things where
there's the that direction. There's the trade cover of the whole thing, the whole kit and caboodle. $60 trade, everything.
$60
retail, but yes.
So $60.
It's gonna be a
lot of comics.
Yeah.
$60.
Retail.
It's probably cheaper than buying the original issues.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Yeah, that's true.
$60. Good God.
But it's the whole thing. I mean, that's like omnibus size. So
why are you surprised by that? That's how much these giant, complete, omnibus type books are. I mean, It's going to be on in stock trades for like $30 the first week it's out. So
heck yeah,
very true. Very true.
You are correct, sir.
But all that to say that DC is in on your idea. They are calling it the Warworld Saga, and it's an apt title because I feel like
it was always kind of talked about like that in those terms. But
was it?
it was and it wasn't, if that makes sense. Like it definitely was referenced, I think, by Philip Kennedy himself, Kennedy Johnson, excuse me, I should say. Philip Kennedy Johnson, I think, had called the World Saga. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong on this, but it's interesting because when you look at the actual trades, which I have, is it doesn't it never refers to it. It just says Warworld Rising. It's like I wish it would have on the trade. I wish it would have labeled it a little bit better. But at any rate, yeah, this has been a very yes. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Here, I put it in the I put in this in the notes as well. So the description. So yeah, so we're gonna finish out our Warworld saga, and I'll be honest, I'm gonna throw a lot of it to you guys because I personally just I want to hear what you guys have to say because I love this. I love the story. I know maybe I'm biased. I don't know, but I've really been impressed with how we got a modern age Superman story that's maybe one of the best ones we've gotten in the last 20 years. Again, this is my opinion. This is a Superman, not as much the diehard as you guys are. But from my perspective, without the dramatic, like we're killing them off, event size, if you will, like Uber event. It's an event, but it's more self-contained in the Superman story itself. And it felt very epic in itself. The grand scale of like, it's not pushing like DC narrative forward as far as the actual story, but it's pushing Superman narrative forward to an extent, I would say, or like the mythos, if you will, in a good way, which I think is the best kind of these big saga stories we got, like a Dark Phoenix saga or the Lord help me, the Clone Saga, in a weird way.
Okay, you're the Clone Saga apologist, Paul. I mean,
I'm kind of in the middle. I'm in the middle about it, to be honest. I'm more in the middle.
Evolved recently, then.
I've always said good and bad things about the Clone Saga. I don't want the Clone Saga. It's not about Spider-Man right now. But anyway, I'm saying all this because it feels like we've gotten a story that people still have, like they're just now starting to, not now, but people are just kind of maybe figuring out like, oh, I should check out the Superman stuff now because it's got a little more buzz around it. It's getting a huge trade. I mean, obviously DC recognizes there's money to be made with this for good reason, but it feels like this story will just kind of live on and get bigger and bigger and bigger. I think from like the size of people liking it as it goes on, especially after finishing it. So I'm just going to throw it to Michael Bailey here first. So Michael, we'll just talk about general impressions, everyone, and then we'll get into more details and we'll wrap up out of here. But generally, I know you like this story, but I'm curious where you are, how much you like it after rereading it, if you have recently, just kind of in general, as we were, the conclusion, did it stick the landing for you, kind of, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, it stuck the landing. I mean, the thing about this story is if you're gonna set up a story where Superman is put on the back foot, in this case, losing most of his powers, you are pretty sure that when the conclusion comes, he's going to get his full powers back. And that's not a criticism. It's just how these things are structured. I think the overall point, and it's what we've talked about on the previous episodes, is this is taking Superman at a particular, I'm going to call it low point for the character, because the post-Bendis, I mean, it's just like when Bendis left, the character really wasn't in the best of shape. No one was talking about him. No one cared. And Johnson basically said, okay, I'm going to take this character, I'm going to put him in an impossible situation, and through all of that, he is still going to be Superman. Even when he's not at full power, he's going to make the hard decisions. He's the one that's going to push forward. He's the one that's going to inspire people without having to make 1,500 like epic speeches. And I think that's why this finale works so well, is because Kennedy Johnson set out to do something and he did it. And he did it very, very well, in my opinion. I tore through this when I read it. just because I was just really into the story. And I thought the ending was fantastic.
Yeah, I do want to echo that I feel that he set out to tell an epic story, and it was epic in all kinds of facets. And again, like, and we'll get into details here, but it felt like we're getting a Superman story that is both modern and also truthful to the character. But I also think it was kind of different than we've gotten, but it's also familiar, right? The whole like barbarian. It's a little bit. I don't mean this in a slight, and I'm not sure if it was an influence or not, obviously, but it seems like it could be. It was Planet Hulk, that kind of idea of like stripping away the character, like barbarian, but in a sense, right? You have like, the whole barbarian kind of aspect, which on a surface level, if I'm looking at just strictly as a a very, very vain surface level, if you were to show any average fan this, you would make assumptions of like, okay, he's like, as a barbarian, Superman, blah, 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 blah. But that's not what we got from this story. It's exactly the opposite. And that's the thing I thought that was really interesting. And I think that's a credit to the Phillips writing, is that he takes the concept of this whole, like, you're stripping the suit away from Superman, right? What makes, I think, I know, I agree. I need to read Exile. I realize this. I understand, Javi. But we're stripping like the colorfulness, what makes like this, the essence of what we think of Superman. You strip it away. So you strip away the powers. Again, it's that symbolic, like we're stripping away the character. And it's more than just a barbarian. It's like he's literally hanging on for his life. And it's very interesting because I didn't assume he'd lose his powers or be powerless. I thought it was a nice touch, to be honest. And that whole idea of weapons and things like that, it plays a part in this third story. So again, there's lots of great detail of visuals that he uses, he being Philip, I think in a very, very awesome way. So Javi, give me kind of your general impressions of the third act. We'll get into details in a second, but just, did it stick the landing for you?
I think there's a reason that Michael Bailey is referred to as the professor in certain circles. And he's always good at like reminding me of context. And because I'd kind of forgotten the whole Bendis era. Like in my brain, it goes from like New 52 to Rebirth with all the Dan Jurgens and Tomasi stuff. And I kind of just gloss over Bendis because as much hype as they pushed at the time with the 80th anniversary and the trunks are back and Bendis is coming, like that's when I stopped reading the titles on a regular basis. So I kind of forget about it. So what Michael did right now is remind me that, at the time that this all started, there was a lot in the air when it came to Superman. Like we had John aged up into a teenager, courtesy of Bendis, and there's lots of uncertainty with Future State and if John was going to be Superman going forward and Superman was going to be older and like just didn't know where it was going to fit in, especially with John knowing that his father was going to go off and die.
Well, and I liked the first couple things I read of Bendis, and I know it fell off the rails apparently, but I will say this: you got to give him some credit that aging up John, maybe that was a foregone conclusion, but it's done DC well. I think it's serving a better purpose than people probably would have given him credit for. I'll just say that.
under other people's pens, I would say.
No, I did, but he pioneered it.
Getting back to this title, like it brought an uncertainty and an excitement to it. And for me, like I pointed out in the comment, like I didn't necessarily think of it as Planet Hulk. I went back to Superman Exile, which is like just a fantastic story of Superman dealing with his PTSD of killing someone else and leaving the planet and finding Warworld and Mongol and fighting in the arena and having this kind of barbarian look. So it was like a cross between Exile and Kingdom Come with the S shield. But it's just one of those like stories like the death of Superman that like every time I reread it, like it just gets better and better for me. And I mean, I read it all as it came out in print, and then I wound up binging the whole storyline when we did the first episode. And then now I'm on like I've read it like 3 times now, which isn't something I say a lot of like current comics.
Yeah.
Just because there's so much out there and so many other projects that I'm working on that I don't have a lot of time to do rereading like I'd like or like I used to. So the fact that, I happily dove into this again over the weekend and just love every second of it, especially that annual dealing with Clark and Mongol's origins. It's just Superman perfection, and it's still going on, which is the amazing part, because he built on all this and is pushing it into new directions.
Yeah, no, totally. And so just before I get to throw it to you, Chris, I wanted to reread all this, and that's the one thing I would say that is really enticing. And this is not me just brown nosing, because I think Philip Kennedy Johnson is one of the best writers working in comics right now, and because I like his Alien run, and he has a way of just balancing things out enough to where it lures you in, and it's a page turner, and it flows really, really well from and just because to truth be told, when I started reading this, I read it a couple weeks ago, and I'm like, I better get on this because I'll whatever, and I meant to kind of peruse it like just one day, and I ended up reading it because again, for me, finding time's hard. I read this over 2 days, no problem, which I was not anticipating. I thought I'd just kind of nibbling at it a little bit, just kind of make sure I got some stuff done with it. But I blew through this, and I read most of it in one day, finished it up in one night, and I was like, damn, like it's just it flows. The pacing is exceptional. I think it's probably Phillips, I think maybe his best secret, his secret weapon. His pacing, he's great dialogue too. I think that maybe is the strongest part of his writing. I think is his dialogue. He's very good, but his stories are always solid. But as far as the overall narrative, his pacing is incredible, because in Alien, I love this Alien stuff. Hulk's been great. So I love this. So Chris, I'll throw it to you. Just reading this, did it sit the landing? Kind of general thoughts.
General thoughts are very solid. When you and I did our our get together and discussion of Future State, I talked a lot about how I was not expecting much of anything.
I refuse to read it.
yeah. I mean, you absolutely refused to read Superman Worlds of War, and I mean, based on the cover, I wouldn't necessarily blame you, despite the fact that Mikhail Giannin is a beautiful artist.
Well, right.
It just it seemed like it was just pushing forward this machismo, arguably rather toxically masculine idea. It was like a war, and Superman's gonna have a shirt off and be a gladiator.
That's what I'm saying.
The crap out of it.
Now,
and then
really quick, I just want to interrupt, because Kavi, you talked about Planet Hulk. Only reason why I said Planet Hulk was because on the surface, that's what I thought. That's what came to mind was Planet Hulk, and that's exactly what. That's exactly what you Chris saying that. That's what I rebelled against. Was I'm like, this is my shirt off. I got 8-pack or 12, 13-pack, whatever.
I mean, that's just there's nothing against that. I mean, that's
because
that's your Marvel brain.
I love Planet Hulk.
That's your Marvel brain. So I see why you would say that. I'm just saying he's been here before. But the beauty of what Johnson does is this isn't just a rehash of that other story. There are familiar elements, but he takes it in a bold new direction and really gets at the heart of Superman's heroism.
Yeah. Sorry, Chris. Go ahead. Continue. I apologize.
Anyway. And then, Worlds of War ended up being a reading experience that I felt enriched in my soul over. I was not expecting those books that have such easily discernible potential trappings to be so truthful to the guy that I know. And finishing the story, I think the thing that just really emphasizes to me why this is a great Superman story is that it is one that goes out of its way to emphasize his strength through his compassion. His compassion is not something that can be challenged, even or arguably, especially when the chips are down, right? I mean, he says in multiple places over the course of this story. So what? We're just going to do the right thing when we're stronger than our enemies? And it's like, no, that is Superman. He is one who persists, whose ideals and beliefs in truth, justice, and either the American way or a better tomorrow, preferably both. He's someone who understands the strength of giving people a hand up, the strength of giving an ideal of hope to try and push toward. And Johnson, for my money, is a pitch perfect Superman writer. The stories that he's written have proven to me, probably far more than a lot of other writers at a similar point in their runs with the character, that he's got the perfect temperament to write Superman, because he understands what really does make him exceptional. I mean, I spent 7 years, roughly a little under 7 years, in a comic book store trying to convince people that Superman was cool, which was a maddening exercise in a lot of cases, especially being in a college
It's
town where
fleeting,
everybody,
Chris.
like right when Deadpool was getting popular, trying to convince people that Superman was worth your time. But the people that stuck with it, and the people who, actually took the time to read the stories, understood where his strength does come from, because they believed that, oh, well, he's just good for the sake of being good, and he can fly, and his powers are boring, and yada 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 yada, without really understanding the beating heart at the center of who this guy is. Johnson emphasizes that right out of the gate with his first couple of issues. This is the thing that sets Superman apart. This is the thing that makes people follow him into the gates of hell and back. This is the thing that instills in people the desire to believe in something greater than themselves. And it's not even necessarily that they worship him. And in fact, he actively dissuades people from doing such things. It's that you can find your salvation in yourself. There's nothing wrong with asking for help. And if you need it, I will give it to you to get there. But you are greater than me. You are greater than all of us. You are greater than Mongol. It's something he could never possibly understand. If you lived under his thumb for so long, let me try and show you how great you all are, so that you can decide your own destinies. That's just like, those are just a few of the ideas that play in this story, and taking him as sort of a fish out of water in order to try and emphasize those elements of Superman's personality, those traits of his leadership, and those intangible components of his power. That's one of the reasons why I love this story as much as I do. And I'm very grateful for the fact that this is one of the key stewards of the character right now.
I want to jump off, if you don't mind, something Chris
Please.
just said, as I think he gets to the heart of something. And don't take this as me like saying you did something wrong, Chris. I think what this run does is it proves that Superman is one of those characters that quietly inspires people.
Yes.
And when you try to make him cool, it never works. I love Jeff Johns as a writer. I think his characterization of Superman in the first Justice League arc from the New 52 was someone trying to make Superman cool for a new audience, and it just fell flat for me. Ooh, what can you do? I have found that you get more Superman converts when you just talk about what you like about Superman.
Absolutely.
Instead of trying to like evangelize for him. And I think that's what Johnson did with this story, is that he just had Superman literally speak for himself. And by doing that on a textual level, it is how he was able to, as you said, inspire these people to rise above the rule of Mongol. On a metatextual level, it just shows people who may not be that into Superman, is just like, oh, this is why he's cool, is because he doesn't flaunt it. What if, I don't know if it was in the novel or in the comic, but there's a line from Kingdom Come that Superman's most necessary failing is he doesn't see what an inspiration he is. And that's where the character works best, when he's doing stuff that's inspiring, but he doesn't see it that way.
He just is.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, whoever listens to someone who outwardly and openly expresses like, I'm great. Here's why you should listen to me, because I'm the best. I will lead you to the promised
I mean,
land.
yeah. How do you want me to answer this?
I will get you to where you want to go. Just believe in me, because I alone can do it. Right? Who listens to? I mean, who
Are you a politician?
Who takes people like that really seriously? The real people you take seriously are the ones who have BDE. They just are great.
Wow.
They're naturally gravitational.
I can't believe you just said
believe
BDE.
in them.
Chris,
Oh, look,
my
he's
ears
got it.
and
I'm sorry if that's my hot take of the episode.
I understand.
then
I
it is.
understand. Superman's got BDE, okay, and a BD. I get it. I get it. All
He
right.
has the strength of he has the strength of his convictions.
I'm
He
sure
is
it has
a
the strength.
natural-
I get it.
He is
I've seen Mallrats. Okay.
All right. Look,
Oh,
no, don't take it too far. Okay.
I'm just
You have to
joking.
tastefully pepper it in. But he's the kind of person that is a naturally gravitational leader.
I agree.
And inspires, like Mike said, by doing.
Now, Mike, I think you have just beautifully said a number of things here. I mean this seriously. You brought this home. I love how you said that you can't make Superman cool. You can't evangelize for him, right? Some heroes need that. Some heroes need the people to preach the word of whatever it is. Like, oh no, you gotta give it a shot. You gotta give it a shot. And sometimes that works, right? But you bring up a great point. It's not evangelizing and preaching the word of like how cool and how great Superman is, but more of like, yeah, like this is a good story. I really love this story a lot. And I think Warworld Saga is a great example of that happening very organically and naturally. And that honestly got me, like, honestly, when reading those comics for Future State with Chris, I'm like, those are pretty good. I had no interest in reading it again, really. And then I started hearing about the Warworld Saga, and then like, it kind of ties in back to those Future State comics that I liked. It's like a big story. Huh. Okay. And people was like talking about it, they liked it. I'm like, I should check this out. And now I'm really glad I did. And this wasn't people. It wasn't people preaching to me like, oh, it's again like Chris being like, man, this Superman comic really good, man. You should read this. I'm like, oh, okay. And I read it. I'm like, oh, dude, this is awesome. So it's not just being like, you have to read this, blah, blah, blah. It was just like, oh, you should read this. I really like this. This is pretty cool. It happens more naturally. And
you're giving me a little too much credit. I was pretty insistent.
I always give you too much credit. But anyway, no. But one thing I wanted to say too is like we talked about Captain America and Superman being very similar of characters, like characterizations, if you will, right? Of like no one would have thought Captain America would be cool. You know, when I was a kid, I never thought Captain America would be cool, and now he's cool, right? Or was cool, whatever. Right? You know what I'm saying? Like he's popular, people like him, and so it does. You bring up a great point that you can't like make Superman cool. He has to inspire people naturally. And that's what Captain America did in the comics. That's what he did in the films. And that's what I think James Gunn has done a great job of. At least he's saying the right things of what I think Superman needs to do in film going forward. But without going too forward, I want to talk about this annual because I'm really want to, get at you guys' opinions about this. And Michael, I'm going to go to you first. This was, I think in the trade, Javi, I think it's the first thing you read, right? It's the annual. And so when I picked this up, I'm like, okay, it's an annual. Okay. Oh, what's this? It's Clark Kent. That's cool, I guess. And I'm going to give a very mild criticism, and it's very, very mild. I love the Clark Kent story. It's a little on the nose. No pun intended, of the character that happens to him later, because he punches Clark. Sorry, I'm into the weeds here. It's a little on the nose, but when in conjunction with the Mongol storyline, and especially of what happens in the story later on, I thought it works beautifully because that characterization plays upon that he builds upon that later on in the story as we go forward in the Warworld Saga. Michael Bailey, how'd you like this story? Because I thought this Mongol story was fantastic. And I think, was it Sai who wrote the Mongol side?
I don't know who wrote which side, but I know it was co-written by Johnson and Spurrier.
I love Cy Spurrier. He just wrote this fantastic Flash comic, which I recommend people go pick up. Anyway, I love the story. I love the story. I think that Clark stuff was a little heavy-handed for me, but I think in the context of what Philip was going for, I totally get why he was a little heavy-handed, and it doesn't bother me. And I thought it was a great thing to kind of remind us of these characters. So, I had no idea what Mongol was and all that stuff. I don't know if this is new, old. Michael Bailey, take me to school. What's your thoughts on this?
It's a new take on Mongol. Mongol, when he was created, was Diablo Frank, who is a podcaster and frequent commenter over on the Fire and Water Network, once referred to him in the old days as the guy you got when you couldn't get Darkseid. And I think I think the reason why he has any kind of cachet is because he was in For the Man Who Has Everything, where Alan Moore just made him a menacing character. And then you get into the post-crisis world where he is the leader of Warworld, is the impetus to the Exile storyline, which Chris was talking about earlier. And then was part of the reign of the Superman and all that. And then he was killed by Naren during Underworld Unleashed. So the Mongol you see after that is actually the son of Mongol.
Right.
And eventually you get to see his sister, Mongal, which is a fantastic name.
It's pretty good.
This is kind of a new old take on the character. You mentioned it when you were talking about it. I love how you show how a mother's influence can lead you down one path or another. The reason why this story meant so much to me is my mom had cancer when I was in the 10th grade, and she passed away when I was in my senior year. So seeing Superman going through something similar, though he was very much younger in this, really got to me. This was the issue that I had to stop for a bit because it got me really freaking emotional. Okay. I just love that Clark just wants to take up for his mom, and I love that it's Martha. Okay, no one's going to say it. Thank you. We've moved beyond that joke. I appreciate that. I love that it's not Jonathan. It's not Jonathan who's sick. It's not the father. It's the mother, which so brilliantly dovetails into
that's a good point. Yeah.
Mongol's story. And it's one of those things where we've seen flashback type stories with Superman before that kind of show where he is. We were talking about Jeff Loeb before the show started. There's a really great bit in one of his early issues where he talks about where Jonathan shows him how to throw a punch. And it's this really great little scene that speaks to how Superman is and why he is. And this is just another example of that. I'm just going to have to say that since this cover is up right now. Anybody think that this should be on a van?
Yes. Yes.
And when that when that van stops and the door rolls open, you hear Tom Sawyer by Rush playing really loud, because that's the vibe I get off of this.
Definitely
that's not a criticism.
Rock.
It's just
definitely some prog rock of some kind. Emerson, Lake and Palmer, early Roxy music. I mean, any of that stuff, you could get away with that van. Yes, album.
It's just but the annual was just so good.
Yeah.
I honestly have to say this just in general. Superman annuals for the last couple of years have been really freaking good. None of them have been bad. It's kind of remarkable when you think about it. They haven't done a dud yet with these annuals. And I'm really excited now when one pops up. We just had a couple months ago, we had the Superman annual by Joshua Williamson, which was just fantastic. I'm not a big fan of this cover.
It's retro to me. I like it because it's retro, in my opinion.
But at the same time, it has a very Mike Allred feeling to it.
Yeah, that's fair.
Which, after reading Superman Space Age, now makes me like the cover, if that makes any sense. But no, I just think that if you're gonna show why a character is the way they are, it's just such a brilliant way of doing that.
Yeah.
And it's why, yes, it's something that's been done before, but if you do it well enough, no one's gonna care.
Yeah, I agree with that. Javi, you love this annual too. Hit me up with your thoughts on this annual.
I feel a little bit different than Michael when it comes to annuals, because a lot of times they can just be like, here's more money that I have to spend to have all of my collection, and it's not going to be as impressive or whatever. And this one really surprised me by how effective it was. And it kind of it took me to like a place where like it's neck and neck with what's so funny about Truth, Justice, and the American Way, where it kind of shows just the power of Superman and what he can stand for, and that it comes from the love that he got, from his parents. And art wise, I like the two contrasting styles, and and maybe it's my Smallville bias, but I felt like young Clark was kind of like a young Tom Welling, at least with that haircut.
I like the hair.
Yeah. No, I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying I was like, oh, it feels kind of like Tom Welling a little bit. But where the story ends up for Superman at the end of it is I don't know. It really got to me, because we've seen like Kenny Braverman, and we'll see him in some of the backups, and how that relationship from his past worked out. And this is a different take on that, or a different outcome. I'll just leave it at that for those who haven't read it yet. But it's definitely one of my favorite Superman comics from like the last 5-10 years.
Awesome.
There's something about seeing Kenny Braverman. It's like that meme. It's like no one, absolutely no one. Hey, here's Conduit.
I love that stuff. Chris, what's your take on the annual?
There's very little I can add. I mean, those contrasting viewpoint stories that get to the root of what makes Superman exceptional are always going to be a big hit with me. This one, I think, tends to hit a little harder, because Johnson seems to know his way around this kind of writing, and B, just because of the circumstances that he's constructed around both Clark and Mongol. I'm forced to think of greatness from small beginnings. Sic parvis magna. That's the catchphrase of Nathan Drake in the Uncharted games. He's got it on his ring for the course of the 3 games, and that's what this is. It is roads to greatness from 2 very different paths, 2 diametrically opposed paths, and I mean, obviously, I have a greater fondness for the Superman side of things, because getting that look from the ground floor when those early years are explored effectively, and we can actually see the roots of something that starts small and grows into something big, as Martha alludes to in the annual. I find it fascinating when executed well, and it really was a touching story in a way that I really should expect this by now, but I don't. I don't expect these things to hit me as hard as they do. The additional angle of Martha's treatment that she's going through does add a certain degree of punch, but it also reinforces the kind of leadership that Superman would grow into later. And you can see that when he's given the right direction by the right people, he can manage to bring even the most obstinate of foes, like a fellow 7-8 year old kid, to his side, and it also just reinforces that idea that you don't know what other people are carrying in their own lives, and that's a critical lesson that he would learn as a boy, and it's nice to see it explored in such a way here. So I thought it was an exceptional issue, like frankly most of these were.
So I'll stay with you here. We'll get into like the kind of the meat and potatoes here, kind of in more details, and we'll head out here in a little bit. So with this story, and I'll just add this, that I thought it was wrapped up pretty well. And because there's a lot of stuff, a lot of world building he did with Warworld, right? And it's a lot of wars in that worlds, I should say. And I liked the new characters, and I felt like he definitely, I mean, for how much he was juggling, Philip really did bring this all together, I thought, pretty well, with all these different things going on. And I wanted to ask you, Chris, because because obviously this is about Superman, right? The guy in the middle here is what we're here to read. I felt like, even though the moments you kind of brought up earlier about the story, I thought was really impressive in a sense of where, even though they're juggling so many different characters, I mean, it's very much an ensemble book. It's not even about, he's the main character. He's the main focal point. But it's like so many different characters that it's amazing that Superman still becomes and is able to come shine through everything. And it's because of his, the selflessness, right? So talk about the story and just kind of the story beats and things like that, with what your thoughts are on that, and just kind of what your favorite parts about it were.
Well, the way that Johnson constructs it is very much, yes, you're right, an ensemble, but he constructs the ensemble around the necessary sort of leadership gap that Superman fills. So I liked how in the earlier going, the heroes that traveled with him, the members of the Authority who traveled with him to Warworld, they weren't necessarily like full-on believers in him. It's only when the chips are down where he has a chance to prove that he is a legitimate authority that is worth following, that they start to fall in line. And granted, in Omac's case, it goes in a little bit of a different direction. But for the most part, I love how the shared struggle that everybody is experiencing over the course of the first several issues, once we actually do get to Warworld, it's that shared struggle that reinforces why Superman is someone worth following and worth listening to. He proves that even without his powers, he has an insight and a necessary level of compassion to try and bring more people to their side that they would not have had otherwise. If Superman wasn't there out front to try and make the case to other people on the planet that his is a symbol worth following because he reinforces the collective aspirations of their society to try and rise up and actually see their chains for what they are, you don't have this story without Superman's outlook on things. I do like, sometimes it's easy to get impatient with stories that take Superman's defining traits away from him. But in this case, I felt none of that. I just felt like, wow, this is something that is about his outlook, his mindset, and his intangible strength that you can't always see. But you can see his determination. You can see his desire to, in some respects, as we saw in these issues, give kids a childhood and give them a chance to have a better life that they get to choose the path for. He's not out to dictate anything. And he sees someone who is out to dictate something and knows that guy's got to go. And we have to show, not only does he have to go, but we have to show everyone why his way of doing things is wrong.
Yeah.
And without Superman, you don't have that.
Yeah, and Chris and Javi, let me know anytime you guys want us. Just don't even private chat. Just tell me on here. I'll throw it up here. So Javi, I'll throw it to you if you want to add anything on this page. You messaged me about the annual. Go ahead and say it now, then we'll get your thoughts on some of the details of the main story.
Yeah, it just Martha's words just emphasize, the power of kindness and empathy and how you can change the world. And he takes that idea to Warworld, and like we see, like Chris was mentioning, like at the start, it's just no one buys what Superman's trying to sell, the different way of life. Everyone is so ingrained in their mentality of, whoever has the most chains, is like the best. And over the course of this over the course of this saga,
That's for you, Michael.
just by being true to himself, like we get, the unblooded sword and how his ideals wind up, turning everyone into a rally to where everyone is wearing his kingdom come inspired insignia into battle and chanting, for the unblooded sword. And even when we get to the climax of what happens, where there's a choice that he has to make, and the reason why he goes the way he does. I mean, it's a Superman, and that's, and it's, one of the things I really like about the character is like the romance aspect of between Lois and Clark, and that's not something we get here at all, really. But we do get like his little Civil War letters home kind of deal in his journal, mentioning it. But that's like that's his heart, and that's, even though they're not present in his side of the story that we see, because there's other stuff going on in the backups, they're still very near and dear to what he's doing and why he has to do what he's doing, because he wouldn't be himself. He wouldn't be the person that they love if he didn't do that.
Yeah. Before I throw it to you, Michael Bailey, I think it's really, really fascinating of really bringing up all the attributes of Superman that make him interesting. And that's what Philip is highlighting, because there's the moment where he's going to meet the first god, or I think it's like the old god, I should say, maybe. And that is one of my favorite moments of the book. If not my favorite, besides with the Mongol stuff on the annual. I thought this was a great way of explaining of who he is, but in a really fun, like action-packed way. But really, just again, I love the character's response to it, and like it just, again, like there's that selflessness, that selfless act, because the act he's doing is selfless, and then he does more on top of it to add to like his selflessness, right? And I think that to me was really fascinating, and that's why he's able to figure out the riddle, right? Like he's able to because he doesn't look at things the same as other people, because he was trained, like you were saying, Javi. He has the mothers, like he learns lessons from his parents. And this is, again, a big difference between Batman and Superman, is that Batman only had like Alfred, a paternal figure, but he had two parents raising him, teaching him. Again, and parents ain't perfect, I, as a parent myself, make a lot of mistakes. But I think because my wife and I are so different, and we have our strengths and our weaknesses, it's really cool to see, I think, the dynamic of a parent relationship here, of like, again, we see the Jonathan aspects a lot. I think what you were Michael Bailey or Javi were saying, I forgot which one, but the fact that it's Martha, I thought it's a good point, because it emphasizes the strength of the character, the selflessness. And I think he learned a lot of that, I think, through Martha. At least that's the impression I think that Philip's trying to get to us with this. But I think you're absolutely right about that. And I love this aspect of the story of his selflessness is what carries and what saves Warworld, essentially, right? I think that's a beautiful theme of the story. Michael Bailey, with this, I'm curious, does this make you kind of different? Did you get a fist bump in the air of this ending? I just, for some reason, I did. I fist bumped. I was like, yeah, at least once. I think it was during this time right here that I really fist bumped, or pumped, I should say. Were there any moments like that for you in this? Besides, I know the annual was emotional for you, but I thought it was really, really well done. Better than a writer I have read in a long time, maybe ever, a modern writer of Superman, just really nailing that aspect of the character so well, where I'm like, yeah, in a very action-packed way.
Yeah, I mean, the strength of this ending is not only does Philip Kennedy Johnson stick the landing, which is endings are hard, as a good friend of
Yes.
mine often says. But the thing about it is that there have been so many. Well, I say that I always hate it when other people say that, so I'm not going to say it. When you look at Superman in the 21st century, there seems to be this tendency, especially towards the end of the New 52, to kind of take him out of his traditional costume and try to tell like a big story with him, and it hardly ever works. And it's because most of those stories were coming from a perspective of we're going to strip everything away, and at the end he gets his powers back. I mean, the first Truth storyline, so good they tried it twice. Was, he loses most of his powers. He's walking around in a t-shirt and his cape, tied around his hands, and he rode a motorcycle, and he said damn in hell because, PG-13 swearing is awesome. And at the end, he got his powers and his costume back, and then they killed him. But I don't think those two things were connected. Here, he's taken out of his traditional costume. He's put into the barbarian outfit, which for a while on my hutch, I actually put next to my Planet Hulk figure, and they looked very cool together, I might add. And he manages to take him out of his costume, lower his power level, and yet still make it all work. And make this, like at the beginning of this story, it's just like Superman's aged and he's lost some of his powers. That was explained away in a very satisfying manner.
Yeah.
I thought they were just going to kind of brush it under the rug, but no, there's like an actual story point. I also liked the letters home. I kind of imagine when he was writing it, like he had the Ken Burns Civil War music playing in the background as he's writing to his dearest Lois. But no, it's just this could have. We've waxed Philip Kennedy Johnson's car for like 3 episodes now, so I don't feel like what I'm about to say is going to be taken out of taken badly. But the fact of the matter is that sometimes when you have a big story, and sometimes when you have a big Superman story and you end it, it isn't like it kind of just ends, and the status quo is returned. And here it didn't feel like that. It felt like it ended as it began, and that a full story was told. The themes of the story were explored well, and now we're going to move on to the next one. It didn't set up like the next 15 years of Superman stories. It, just at the end of it, we just knew that it was going to move on to the trade that you showed earlier with Kal-El Returns, which was a crossover that wasn't a crossover. Do not think that all those stories are going to connect to each other, because they don't. Just to let you know. No, I really, it brought me back to a certain extent. I was, and I say that I was coming back regardless, and then they announced that they were reinstating the secret identity, and I was just like fully back. But this was kind of like my John Wick moment. Where
I love that. That was great. Yeah.
Where it's just like, I guess, people are asking if I'm back, and I guess I'm saying, yeah, I'm back. And it was nice to have that. It was nice to come back to this storyline instead of picking up something that maybe wasn't as good.
Or just solid enough to where it makes you kind of go, okay, I lived through Bendis. This is better than Bendis, but it's still not a high mark, kind of a thing. But instead, it's actually like, man, this is some of the least, again, the way I interpret what you're saying, it sounds like this is like legit great Superman comics where we have not gotten in a long time.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that.
Yeah. So I think and I think that's what's really exciting, and I'm really excited. Maybe we'll do Joshua Williamson when the trade comes out in a few months here. I don't know. I'll have to try to convince you guys to come on and talk about that, because I'm really excited, because I want to see how it is to read Philip Kennedy Johnson with Joshua Williamson together, because they are spearheading the modern Superman era, and it seems like they've been doing nothing but great things. And I really do feel that, from my very very inexperienced Superman eye, that even with Philip Kennedy Johnson, what he's put some pretty important pieces in this story for future storylines. And I'm very intrigued. There's lots of great stuff here. Chris, give me some, and you obviously have access to the pages you want to bring up, but yeah, just kind of some more specific stuff you kind of want, before we wrap up here in a little bit. Give me your kind of take on some of these finer points of, if you want to bring up that you haven't brought up before.
Well, I mean, I chose this page, and I think that it's one that emphasizes the openness, right? The idea of letting someone kind of join the family in a way, and opening himself to, look, yeah, if you want to come back with me, you can, but I'm going to give you options. If you want to choose me, please come home with me. But you have a whole culture to explore that you've never been exposed to, and I want to open your eyes to that, and I want you to choose where you want to go. It's a nice idea. The compassion of the inclusiveness, especially for a child who has only really known brutality up to this point in his life. It makes sense that naturally that child would want to follow a leader like Superman, but Superman also has the presence of mind to say that that's an option, but here are some other options. And
you can have this Beskar armor, or you can have this lightsaber.
there you go. Yeah, it's just like it. He wants, for the first time in both of these kids' lives, he wants to give them a series of good options instead of having to choose between horrible circumstances and maybe possibly less horrible circumstances. The compassion on display here is what really got to me. But also too, in those final moments when we're teeing up the final confrontation with Mongol, and Superman chooses to use the light of that old god to save the life of a child that Mongol carelessly killed, and Mongol just can't fathom it. Why would you waste this on such weakness? And I love that Superman just says, this is why you could never have won. Now get up and fight.
Yeah, so good.
There are always plenty of things that Superman can respond to that require a steady hand and staying that hand when necessary. But he's also someone who understands there are times I have to let loose. And I'm not as powerful, but I know I can best this guy. And I'm going to make him regret ever putting his boot on these people. And it's another element of Johnson's characterization that I would argue in certain circles does not get enough service. Superman resorts to force when there is no other option. But when that is the option in front of him, he does not hesitate. You can count on the idea that he will judiciously exercise that, especially at the height of his power. But even when he's not at the height of his power, he doesn't go out picking a fight, but that doesn't mean he ever backs down from one.
Yeah.
And I love that about it. I especially love that about modern Superman. But also, too, I just want to, I think it's easy to look at Bendis's influence on Superman as kind of an outsized outlier. But at the same time, too, I'm thinking back over like the last decade of Superman, and I don't have an abundance of complaints. I mean, I certainly have a few, and I certainly have some big ones in certain respects. Like Scott Lobdell comes to mind.
And you hate him so much.
Well, he messed up. Like
I know. All right. Who else?
I probably wouldn't hate him as much if he wasn't on Superman. But
okay. Anyway,
since you're a Tim Drake fan now, you would probably feel a little strongly if you read New 52 Teen Titans.
Listen, there's a reason why I didn't, sir. That's all I got to say. So anyway, continue.
Anyway, outside of Lobdell, a couple of examples of some of the New 52 stuff. I think back to obviously Grant Morrison. I'm a big fan of. Greg Pak, I think, did great work on Action Comics, especially under the circumstances. And we got a pretty decent slight run of John's stories. Gene Luen Yang, I think, did some pretty solid work with Superman. And then you jump into Rebirth, and Tomasi Gleason's Superman run, I think, was pretty exceptional. And then you had Dan Jurgens on Action, who brought another great level of consistency to it. And then you had Bendis. And Bendis just permeated everything because he was given a degree of control over Superman that no one had really had since John Byrne. So naturally, the size of Bendis's personality and his outsized influence on an entire corner of the DC universe looms large. And I do need to finish that run. It's not fair to disparage it, for me at least, because I haven't finished reading it. I've tried a couple of times and I've just put it down, which might say something, but you know, I'll get to it in the fullness of time. But overall, over the past 10 years, like, we've been in a pretty good spot with a lot of Superman stories, but did I have such a visceral reaction to those stories as I've had with Johnson's? I honestly don't think so. Now, granted, it's difficult to gauge that in the moment, and emotions are difficult to be objective about, of course. But the themes that he's playing with, the elements of the Superman character that he wants to emphasize in his storytelling, the vibrant, dramatic route, the epic scale without getting too unwieldy with what the stakes are, everything about this just really hits home. And I think it stands just as strongly with a lot of other solid examples of Superman stories that we've seen over the last decade at least, but also probably going beyond that.
Javi, why don't you take us home, my friend?
Oh man, I don't know how to follow that up.
Oh, you can follow it up. You got this.
I mean, Chris pretty much hit everything on the head right there. Not to swerve off on a Bendis rant, but with Rebirth, like, things were going really well, in my opinion. And not that I don't enjoy Bendis as a writer, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And it was just, we finally landed this big fish, so let's let him do whatever he wants. And, you know, it'd be one thing if the direction of the book was tanking and we've got to bring in someone else just to do whatever with it. You know, we aren't in Green Lantern territory where we've got to bring in Green Arrow and do socially conscious stories, or we got to bring in Kyle Rayner. Like, things were good on the Superbooks, in my opinion. And with this story, I feel like we're back to that solid footing again, where we're getting interesting, dynamic stories and not telling why Superman is relevant, why he's important, why he's special. And this highlights that, because as we've discussed before, you know, so many people will put emphasis on he's too powerful or he can do everything. And what we have in this story is like, that's all great. And that's part of the fun of Superman. But what really makes Superman stand out is who he is because of his parents. And that panel that Chris brought up, like, it's just a perfect full circle from the annual of, this is how Mongol was raised. This was how Clark was raised. And we see it culminate in that climax of why Mongol thinks the way he does and how he's perplexed by how Clark feels the way he does. And it just, like we've been saying all night, it just, for me, it gets to the heart of the character and what I think makes him really special, and why for the last 3 years, when it comes to the main books, I've actually been enjoying reading Superman in action more than Batman and Detective. And I say that as a writer, you know, a senior contributor on Batman on Film, who reviews Batman books, a lot of which are Black Label and stuff or miniseries that I love. But month in and month out lately, these are the titles I'm looking forward to the most. And that's down to, like, the characterization that Philip Kennedy Johnson brings. And we haven't talked about it enough. Some of this art, and I can't remember, I don't remember his name right now. Federici,
Yeah, Federici. Yeah.
the one that looks really illustrated. I mean, it's gorgeous. There's no other way to say it. Like, he doesn't do a whole lot. I imagine it's very time consuming, the work that he puts out, but especially as we get beyond this story and get into some of the Metallo stuff, like, it's just breathtaking, like comic book art. Like, it's amazing. So I'm really happy that we've broken these down and gotten to all talk together about them, because it's just a special story, and it was really edifying for me. As this was happening when they were coming out, to kind of message Michael Bailey back and forth, and as someone who I've followed, and how long has From Crisis to Crisis been going on, like, and I've followed that journey of dipping in and out of the books, and your love for it, and to hear your enthusiasm and to see that it was mirroring my own, just convinced me how special, like, the time we're in right now is.
Yeah. Speaking of Michael Bailey and Crisis to Crisis, I'll let you have the final thoughts, and before we say anything you want to add before we go, want to touch on?
No, there's nothing I can add to that. Chris and Javi pretty much said the length and the breadth of it. Because I could talk about Bendis, and I could talk about all the other stuff, but it would just be rehashing that. This was an amazing story.
Yeah.
It is one of those stories that you can just put into somebody's hands and say, here's a good Superman story. Here's one of the better ones, especially from this century, which is a weird thing to say and makes me feel old.
It's because we are old, Michael.
Because we all started reading comics in the late 20th century. It's a kick to the throat. But
true though.
And the nice thing is, and I think it was Javi who said it, they going from Jurgens and Tomasi to Bendis was going from strength to strength. I think we've done that here. Is at the end of this story, we're going from strength to strength. We're going from a really good story to Johnson on Action Comics and Joshua Williamson, who I think we are in the midst of Superman's Hush. And every issue that I read of Joshua Williamson's Superman book makes me think that I am absolutely right, that this is going to be that 12 issues or so is going to be Superman's version of Hush. It's going to be a Superman story that you can hand, that has all of these really cool things of his world, and adds a couple new wrinkles to it, and is just one of those things that basically says who the character is. But you don't get there without this.
Right.
And that's the important part.
That's awesome. I can't wait to read it. I'm excited to check it out. It comes out, I think, next year, unfortunately. So it's only a few months away, but still, I'm anticipating picking that trade up. And hopefully maybe we can get you back on and we can talk about that, because I think it's definitely, at least at this point, it was a big moment when it happened, and it's definitely, Superman feels like the buzz has been going, that I think that the Warworld saga started, and I think Joshua Williamson has kind of added on to, obviously. So obviously, Michael Bailey, you are a legend and you have a zillion podcasts. Why don't you? I mean it, bro. Javi knows I'm not BSing. I don't say this lightly, and I've always told you that. I've been consistent, sir, since you've known.
Yes, you
me.
have. Yes,
so I have only been praised, so I don't. That's why I feel comfortable saying that. So anyway, I always appreciate coming on. I know you're busy. It's late over where you are. I do not take it for granted. Thank you so much. But please promote your stuff you have for the audience that maybe don't know where you're at and everything.
For the moment, everything's at fortressofbailey2.com. I am probably over the course of this month. I'm switching my feeds and actually going over to Libsyn and creating new feeds. So the old feeds are going to be there, but there's going to be new stuff, mainly because, for a variety of reasons that are very, very boring to an audience, the shows just aren't getting released like they're supposed to. And I've been doing this with spit and baling wires for so long that I just want to be able to like hit publish and have the episode go out. And I don't have to worry that I screwed up the XML file. But fortressofbailey2.com you can find From Crisis to Crisis, which has been around since Javi asked, since 2009. It was supposed to be a 5-year journey. It's not. I'm very excited that in a couple weeks a milestone will be reached in terms of recording, and that'll come out in November. Something that we never thought would happen, but is actually finally happening. So there's a tease. And you can listen to Overlook Dark Knight, where Andy Leyland and I talk about Batman stories that no one talks about.
Love that podcast.
And we're actually sticking to that. Upcoming on that, we talk about Larry Hama's run on Batman, those 7 issues, and one of the greatest graphic novels ever, Joker Devil's Advocate, from the mid-90s, written by Chuck Dixon with art by Graham Nolan. So, yeah, just go over there. There's literally hundreds of episodes of stuff to listen to.
Yeah, I will say as a someone who's been following you for a while, the Overlook Dark Knight is probably one of the most underrated comic book podcasts out there. People need to check that out. I'm being serious. That is a fantastic show. You are always educating me on things like that. So, and I love you guys have a great chemistry. Andrew's awesome. So yeah, love it. Love that guy. Love that show. So great work. And again, thank you for being on. And
my pleasure.
El Corazon, sir, I have you on a lot.
Oh my God! Yeah,
all the time. I'll always love it. You are a third. You are the third host, sir. Not just a co-host. You are a third member. You are a part. You are the comic binge, sir. So
I appreciate that, man.
Where can people find you at, sir?
I am on BatmanOnFilm.com. Today I had a review published for Batman: The Adventures Continue, Season 3, Number 8, which kind of puts a capper on Paul Dini and Alan Burnett's saga of Batman the Animated Series. So that was a good issue. You should go check that out. Over at thejamesbonddossier.com, I've got a review for 007 for King and Country number 3 that went up a week or two ago. That is written by Philip Kennedy Johnson, who is just crushing it in the James Bond world.
Not surprised.
Pop up on Spidey Dude Experience on occasion. We just did a Patreon episode where we discuss 2 of the MTV Spider-Man episodes. Comic Binge, we have Knights Never Die. We're going through Grant Morrison's run.
Next week, guys, are you guys doing the first episode next week? I keep telling you guys, talk about this. Are we doing it next week?
Second episode.
Well, okay, all right. The first issue,
we're discussing. We're discussing.
All right, I want it next week. I want my J.
You're not the boss of this.
I know I'm not. I'm trying to influence you. Persuade.
We're talking about dictators for the last hour and 13 minutes, and now you're trying to be one. Come on, man.
If the shoe fits.
And on YouTube, I've got The Flash up to speed with Wally West.
Yes.
4th episode is coming. I should have filmed it today. Sorry. My son was actually home and free to do stuff, so we are catching up on Superman and Lois because I've seen it all of season 3, but he hasn't. So I wanted to spend some time with him and watch some Superman being a dad stuff. So that's coming up soon, though. As soon as I get a moment to record it.
Homie, you keep doing your thing.
Notes are done.
You're good. You're good to go. But I appreciate you as always. I cannot wait for the next episode of Knights Never Die. I can't wait for it. So, and Reverend, my best buddy, my partner in crime. Personally, I don't know where I'd be without you. Seriously, you have been a huge anchor for me in especially the last 5 years. You've been there. So, Knights Never Die. Is it happening next week? Yes or no?
We gotta talk. Look,
I can't be there. It's you and Javi. This is you and Javi's show next week. I told you.
This is a show that requires a lot of care, a lot of attention, and for schedules to align. We will bring Knights Never Die to you, touching on Batman number 655 as soon as we can to do it right.
It better be next week because I want to see it. Because next week I have a Star Wars episode with my homies, Scott Rifen and Chris Carey will be here, and Michael Bailey's no stranger to Scott Rifen, the legendary Scott Rifen. So love Scott to death. Call him Scotty Fun. Have you heard to that story, Michael?
No.
Scotty Fun. Ask him the story. He'll kill me for asking it. It was so amazing. It's such a great story. Anyway, Scotty Fun will be here, y'all, and I love that guy. But anyway, hope it's next week, Chris, because but really quickly, where can people find you at?
At Chris Clow, CHRASCLOW. Check out Discovery Debrief, Star Trek podcast. Our most recent episode was a comparing and contrasting of the first season finale of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, A Quality of Mercy, and its heavy inspiration, the original series episode Balance of Terror, the original appearance of the Romulans, and one of the best of the original series, and the two contrasting perspectives on a critical moment in Star Trek lore and the places of critical characters like James T. Kirk and Spock. So check that out if you like Star Trek. Javi has been a guest, and his appearances are always great. So you should check those out.
Javi makes everything great. Let's not
Agreed.
sugarcoat it. It's not sugarcoat.
You finally said something I can agree with.
There you go. So yes, go pick up this. Go pick up then this. Then go pick up this. And you'll have a very good time. Go follow me on Twitter at Herman22 with 2 N's, aka P Thug. Subscribe, like the video, all that jazz. Super appreciate everyone who already has. And we got great shows next week. Hopefully, Next Never Die comes out next week. And as always, Chris, why don't you lead us out here, my friend?
Truth and justice. Read more.